association has one thing in common: physical assets that the association is responsible for. These common assets may be as simple as an entryway into your homeowners association, or as complex as the engineering components in high-rise condominiums. Whether simple or complex, all will face the day when they'll have to be replaced, and the association will have to pay for that work.
Hi, I'm Tony Abruzzo.
And I'm Janet Pound. We're going to take the next half hour or so to discuss with you the subject of capital repair and replacement reserve. The first part of this video is aimed at members of the board of directors. Additionally, we've added a short section following the credits that you can use to show directly to the owners, possibly at a general meeting. In that section, we clearly explain the need for reserves and a reserve study and deal with some of the general objections. If you're having a problem getting owners to go along with the need to fund reserves, this certainly will be helpful.
You know, when unit owners think of maintenance, they generally think of the day-to-day or seasonal maintenance that they can see being done by contractors or employees. Items like lawn cutting, building paint, or just cleaning the common recreational facilities lead an owner to believe that their regular assessment is taking care of the common areas. But even though the assessments are keeping the common areas looking good, these common areas are physical items, which will also deteriorate over time, and most will have to be replaced or undergo major renovation at some point during their life. It's for this replacement or major renovation that capital repairs and replacement reserves are necessary.
You see, the concept of reserve is very simple when explaining it to someone. We want to have the money available when the repair is needed. But when owners see what that might cost, you often get resistance in the form of, I'm not going to be living here when that roof needs replacing. Or, I'll be dead by then. Why should I pay for it now? Or, won't this make the assessment too high for me to sell my unit? These are all legitimate arguments. If the owner was living in a single-family home instead of in a community association, it would be their choice whether to save for the repair or to borrow money for it when the repair is needed, or just to postpone making the repair as long as they can.
But in a community association, the association, not the individual, is responsible for the repair and replacement of the common areas. And the association is required by its governing documents to make those repairs. In many states, associations are required by law to maintain reserve funds for the repair and replacement of major items. One of the first things you need to do when dealing with reserves is to ask your association attorney about your state laws and your governing documents to make sure that you're doing what you're legally bound to do. But even if your state law and documents don't address the issues of reserves directly, you should still consider the whole issue very carefully. Why?
Because in order to be a well-run association, you need to be able to make the repairs when they're required, and association should be on a pay-as-you-go basis. So let's talk about how you're going to do this. As a board member, you're elected to take care of the common areas. Part of that care is planning for the future, and that means having a real plan for those major expense items that will occur 10 years, 20 years, or even further out.
Many associations that have not planned for the day when these items would need to be repaired or replaced ended up assessing the owners additional amounts above and beyond the normal assessment to cover the cost of when the work needs to be done. These additional assessments are among the most unpopular actions that a board can take. It often places financial hardships on the owners, especially those unit owners living on fixed incomes. However, proper planning can prevent this. A capital repair and replacement reserve plan allows an association to determine future financial needs and spread the costs over a period of time. It also allows for the spreading of the cost of replacing common areas between current and future unit owners. As we said earlier, some owners have argued that they shouldn't have to contribute to the replacement of common areas since they're not going to be living in the association at the time of the repair or replacement. However, it's only fair that existing unit owners pay for the current wear and tear on the common areas, just as the new owners will have to pay for it during their residency.
There are other reasons for having a reserve fund. It allows the association to maintain the aesthetic quality of common areas by keeping them in a state of good repair, which directly impacts the property values as well as the satisfaction level of the unit owners. Many state laws specifically require the association to maintain a reserve fund. The secondary mortgage market looks at the association's reserve plan prior to lending. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants now requires their auditors to disclose information in their reports regarding reserve funding. But basically, it's just good business to prepare for those things that you know are going to occur. No surprises should be the rule of all board operations. A well-run association should never have to face an additional assessment outside of the natural disaster that exceeds their insurance.
You need a reserve plan.
A reserve plan consists of three parts: the reserve study, how the reserves will be funded, and what to do with those funds. Let's look at the reserve study first.
A reserve study consists of two parts, a component study and a funding study. Because of the technical details involved, and because of the critical importance of the study, we would highly recommend that the association retain the services of a qualified individual or firm to conduct either or both sections of the study. Although no state law prohibits a board of directors from conducting their own reserve study, they could be exposing themselves to some potential liability if adequate funds are not set aside. If you're not an expert in this area, don't do it.
If you decide to get the formal reserve study done by an outside firm, you need to develop a good set of specifications in order to get an apples-to-apples quote. One of the problems reserve planners face when they're trying to give associations a price on a reserve study is that they're very often given poor or no guidelines as to what is to be included in this study. When that happens, associations end up with quotes ranging everywhere from a Volkswagen to a Cadillac in pricing. Use the information you gain here to put together a good set of specs.
When reviewing the bids, an association needs to take great care in ensuring that the reserve planner they select is fully qualified to complete the study. Have they received a designation from APRA or CAI? Both have established criteria to designate individuals who are qualified to prepare reserve studies for associations. If they are, then you can at least be comfortable that they subscribe to the standards and ethics established by those groups. If they're not designated, then you're going to have to spend a lot more time investigating their capabilities and references. At a minimum, you'll want to talk with other associations for whom they've completed studies and see the final work product. And maybe talk to the board members that worked with them to see if they were fully satisfied. Never contract for a reserve study until you're completely comfortable that the people doing the study are qualified to do one. There'll be more information about how to find these people in the credits at the end of this section of the tape.
What if you don't have the funds to hire these experts right away?
Well, the fact that an association may not be able to afford a full reserve study from a qualified individual or firm should only be a short-term postponement. An association could make use of one of the numerous reserve study kits available in order to initially get their reserve program off the ground. But they should plan for the day when they get a formal reserve study done by qualified people. In fact, they should reserve for this.
If the association decides to have a reserve planner do the reserve study, they need to tell them what type of study they want done. A full reserve study is one in which 5 reserve study tasks are done. These are the component inventory, which is the listing of all of the physical components to be included in the study, an assessment of their current conditions, estimating the remaining useful life, and the repair or replacement cost of the item. the status of the current reserve fund, and a formal funding plan. The second type of reserve study is termed the update with a site visit and on-site review. This includes all the 5 areas covered in the full reserve study, with the exception that the component inventory portion is accepted as is and is not reviewed for accuracy. This is generally done after a full reserve study has been done to see if the reserve plan is on track. The third type is an update with no site visit and off-site review, in which only 3 of the tasks are done. This would be the estimating of the remaining useful life and repair and replacement costs for the reserve component, as well as reviewing the current status of the fund and the funding plan. If this is your first reserve study, we would strongly urge you to get the full reserve study done the first time. Now, let's get back to how the reserve study is done.
The first part of a reserve study determines which components of the association are to be included in the study. A component is a physical item that will deteriorate over time and needs to be repaired or replaced. Start with your association documents to determine which components should be included in the study. The easiest way to do this is to come up with a master list of all of the physical components in the association. Sit down with your attorney and review the list to make sure that, 1, everything is included, and 2, to determine what the association is actually responsible for. Now, you might find some gray areas regarding responsibility, and this is a good time to clear those up. For example, windows and doors in a condominium association are sometimes considered part of the common areas, and sometimes not. As a side benefit, if you share this list with the unit owners, they will then have a document detailing what they are responsible for and what the association is responsible for. This greatly reduces the arguments over whom is supposed to do what.
In your documents, areas may be defined in general terms, such as roads, sidewalks, buildings, or may be broken down into a more detailed listing. In a homeowner association, this may include only recreational facilities and roads. In a condominium association, this may include the building structures, including siding, porches, windows, doors, sidewalks, fencing, etc. If you're in a high-rise condominium, this may include elevators, air handling systems, and other engineering equipment. When this part of the reserve study is done, the association often looks at the most basic and obvious items of the common areas, such as roads, roofs, siding, and the common recreational facilities, such as a clubhouse or pool. They may neglect to include those items that are not easily seen. For example, the association sometimes owns the water and sewer lines from the common buildings to the roads. When looking at mechanical equipment, don't forget the other subsidiary items that are part of the entire system. For example, a swimming pool filtration system includes pumps, possibly heaters, piping, automated chemical feeders, and other items. And with clubhouses, you've got the carpeting, furniture, or office equipment. These will all have to be replaced at some point in time.
Once the list is finished, the board should determine which items will be taken care of in the annual operating budget and which items should be specifically put into the reserve plan. For example, if you have a pool, the cleaning is an ongoing maintenance expense, while replacement of the filter and pump would be considered a capital replacement. Cleaning the roads is a maintenance expense, while top dressing or resurfacing them would be a reserve item.
Next, you need to collect information about the individual items. This is where you determine how much of what type of items do you have. For example, how many square feet of asphalt road? Then, the life and valuation estimate should be prepared. This is estimating the normal useful life of the component, its current condition, its remaining useful life, and the estimated repair or replacement cost for it. Using the road as an example again, how long should a road normally last? What condition is it now in? How old is it now? How much time does that leave before it will need to be repaired or replaced? And how much should that cost?
In determining the useful life expectancy and how much of that is remaining, you'll need to find some source of information to guide you if you're not using a professional reserve analyst. You may find some of this information from the manufacturer of the item or from trade associations that publish standards regarding the items, or you may even have it in your own files if your association has repaired or replaced that item in the past. Don't forget, however, that averages of life expectancy may be national averages, and you may have to adjust for regional differences. Outside areas tend to deteriorate faster in northern climates or near water, especially saltwater, than they do in interior, warmer, and drier climates. You'll also want to look at how the repair or replacement will be done where items overlap. As an example, when replacing the roof of a clubhouse, you'll probably also replace the gutters and downspouts at the same time, even if their life expectancy is longer. So the cost of replacing those items should be scheduled at the same time as the roof. For your information, when we talk about assessing the condition of the components, this is generally based upon an on-site visual inspection of the items, termed non-invasive. This means that the people doing the examination do not take core samples of the roads or dig up the common areas to inspect pipes. If you're concerned about a specific area and wish to have more than just a visual inspection done, you need to make sure that you tell the reserve planner this information in advance or include it in your specifications when sent out for bid. If you're doing the reserve study yourselves, this is one area where you really need experts to help.
Next, you'll need to determine the length of the reserve study. This is the amount of time the study covers. Generally, a reserve study should cover the time when most of the repairs or replacements will be accomplished. This may be 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years. At a minimum, the reserve plan should cover 20 years, unless your state law requires a greater period. The length of time for which you want the reserve study to cover should be included in the criteria you provide to your reserve planner. Now you're ready to begin the funding study portion of the reserve plan.
Check the state law again to see if it covers the area of reserve funding. Again, you'll need to sit down with the association's attorney and make sure that you're in compliance with the law. In some states, there's simply a general provision that adequate reserve funds be maintained. It's up to the board to make sure that what they're planning to put aside will be adequate. Adequate is generally defined as sufficient when the need arises. Although this is somewhat vague, you'll probably want to err on the side of caution. You want to make sure that your reserve study plans for sufficient funds to be available when the item is scheduled to be repaired or replaced. There are a variety of methods used by different reserve planners with different software programs to determine how much money is needed by the association for reserves and when it will be needed. Which method is used by your association or by your reserve planner is less critical than your understanding of just what information that particular method provides you with and what it means. We're not here to argue the pros and cons of each. Instead, we simply want to point out to you that you need to have a clear understanding of the method used. The financial study will examine the current state of your reserve funding and compare it to the projected expenses of the component study. It should recommend a plan for funding reserves in the future. The plan should show you in detail each of the components, when it's estimated that they will need to be repaired or replaced, the cost of that repair or replacement, and the annual contribution required to meet the cost at that particular time.
All funding plans should take into account inflation, interest earnings, and taxes that will impact the reserve fund at any given point in time. You'll need to have your accountant review with you the best way for these items to be handled with respect to your financial reporting methods and your association's tax situation. That basically covers the reserve study and its two parts, the components and the funding study. When you have your final report, it should include a summary that can be given to all the owners, explaining in English what it means to them.
Wow, Look at the size of those numbers. Now, how is an association ever going to come up with that amount of money? I mean, they'll have to double their assessment. The owners will never go for that.
Remember, the board is responsible for preparing the reserve plan. How the reserves are funded is the second part, and an entirely separate issue. Here again, you'll want to double check your documents and your state law to see if they require full funding of the reserves. If they do, then just get on with it. If they don't, then the board is faced with some choices. Associations can generally raise funds three ways: through the normal assessment, through special or additional assessments, and, if your documents permit it, through borrowing. You can choose to fund the reserves by using any or all of these methods, but make sure all of the owners know which method has been selected and what it means, and that buyers moving into your community can make an informed decision about purchasing in your association. As an example, you may choose to raise the annual assessment slightly and make up any shortfall with an additional assessment at the time it's needed. That's fine, as long as it's legal and everyone concerned is informed. That would include adding a statement to any resale or escrow package for potential buyers that would let them know that they could expect an additional assessment when and for how much for certain expected repairs. This allows them to make an informed decision about their purchase. The board should always keep everything open and above board. If you decide that you might want to borrow part of the funds when the repairs are needed, you need to get all of the paperwork done way ahead of time. Borrowing usually requires a vote of the owners, so that needs to be done. Also, you should have all of the necessary approvals from the lending institution done prior to making this method of funding a formal part of your reserve plan. You don't want to count on being able to borrow only to be turned down at the critical time. In other words, don't panic when you see the numbers associated with reserves. Work on putting the best and most sensible funding plan together, always with the goal in mind.
Have the money available when it's needed, and make sure everyone is aware of the plan. Now we come to the third part of the plan, and that is what to do with all that money. The association needs to consider a reserve investment policy. This will guide the association in how the funds are to be invested and where the money is collected are to be placed. As with everything else, start with your association documents and your state law. Since the board of directors has a fiduciary duty to maintain, protect, and enhance the assets of the association, a conservative investment policy is usually the best course. Often the documents will require that association funds be placed only in government-backed instruments or institutions. Even if your documents do not specifically require this, it is by far the safest course in protecting the association's funds.
All policies and procedures regarding the handling of or investment of the association's reserve funds should be put into formal policies and adopted by the board. This provides continuity for future boards.
When investigating potential investments for the reserve fund, first look at safety, then liquidity, and then at earnings potential. Safety is the primary issue, and therefore the association should start with a very conservative policy. The association should limit who has access to the funds and how they may be moved or withdrawn. No one individual or firm should have the ability to transfer or withdraw funds from the reserve account. Reserve funds should always be maintained in an account separate from the general operating funds. At least two signatures, one of which should be a board member, should be required for any movement of the funds. It should require a board resolution to move or withdraw any of the monies. Be very, very careful on this. Reserve funds have been embezzled from associations by treasurers and by management firms. So place as many checks on this process as you can.
Safety should also be considered with respect to where the funds are placed. Government-backed securities, bonds, or accounts are the safest and are probably where the majority of reserve funds are currently placed. Since board members are not being paid to be investment counselors, they should not take the risk of investing association funds in instruments or institutions where the principal could be at risk. Speculating in the stock market is not a real good idea, even though the overall growth of the market over the past 20 years might possibly have given the association an excellent return. Short-term downturns or simply bad stock could cause problems. If you're uncomfortable with the whole investment process, start with the investment counselor at the bank where your association keeps its funds. Give them the policy guidelines for investment, such as only in government-backed instruments, and ask for their recommendations.
The second issue to be concerned with is liquidity. This simply means that you'll have the funds available in cash when they're needed. You should not buy 10-year treasury bonds if you're going to need to withdraw money in 5 years. The best way to handle this is to develop a strategy where you have a combination of short-term and long-term investments, with some portion of them coming up for renewal or rollover every 3 or 6 months. This gives you the benefit of tying in long-term higher interest rates, and yet ensuring that some portion of this will be available without penalty on an ongoing basis.
The last area concerns the return on your investment. While everyone would like the highest possible return, that usually involves the greatest risk. Since high risk-taking is not a goal of community associations, you probably will not benefit from the highest return on your investments over the years ahead. You do, however, want to make sure you get the maximum amount of return possible, given all the safety restrictions you'll be dealing with. Here again, you may want someone from outside the association keeping an eye on various interest rates and instruments, and keeping you posted as to changes and possible investments.
Remember, too, that there may be a $100,000 limit on the backing of government-insured instruments or bank accounts. So don't exceed that limit by putting all of your money into a single institution. Wherever you place the association's funds, make sure that they're covered by the FDIC or SIPC.
There will be tax consequences to your investments, and you need to discuss this with your investment counselor or your CPA so as to prepare the best plan to avoid the payment of unnecessary taxes.
And that's how you put a reserve plan together.
One more thing. When you finally have your first formal reserve plan done, you need to be aware that that isn't the end of it. Different items deteriorate at different speeds, and they're impacted by a variety of outside forces, some of which are beyond your control. An extended period of severe weather could accelerate deterioration of exterior elements. If your association has an aggressive preventive maintenance program, you may find that the components are lasting longer than your initial projections and need to be adjusted. The economy may also impact interest and inflation rates, which will change your annual income totals available. So you need to annually review the financial portion of the study with respect to economic conditions. And every few years you should have your reserve advisor conduct one of the updated studies to make sure you're still on track.
Well, I hope this has helped you with the subject of reserves, and that your association will be able to put together a reserve plan that makes sure that the common areas are maintained to your standards, and that no financial hardships are placed on the owners.
Remember, there's a short section right after the credits that's designed to help explain to unit owners why reserves are needed. Thank you.
And good luck.
I'm Janet Pound.
And I'm Tony Abruzzo.
We've spent the first part of this tape talking to your board of directors about how to prepare a plan for the long-term repair and replacement of your common areas, generally known as a reserve plan. We want to spend a few moments explaining to you, the owner, about why your association needs to have reserves.
The governing documents of your association require the common areas to be maintained. This would include ongoing maintenance and repairs, as well as the eventual replacement of some of them. Since the common areas are all physical items, they'll all deteriorate over time. A reserve plan is designed to tell the association when to expect that cost and about how much it should be. It's supposed to reduce the possibility of unpleasant surprises that might require additional assessments.
Owners, just like you, may question the need or desirability of having reserves, since this often means higher assessments. You may be planning on moving in the near future and don't see why you should contribute to something you won't be around to use.
The answer to that is simply that it's the fairest method of ensuring that the common areas are taken care of. Right now, you're using the common areas, which contributes to the wear and tear and its eventual deterioration. So, by contributing to the reserves, you're paying for what you use, just as future owners will also pay. Remember that common areas need continual repair and replacement. It doesn't just happen once.
By looking at how much longer certain common areas will last and how much it will cost to replace them, the association can make an educated decision about how much money to set aside each year to make sure that when the time comes, the repair or replacement can be made without putting undue financial burden on you. It's always better to pay a little bit more on a regular basis than to face an unexpected major bill.
When your association's books are audited by a CPA, they're now required to look carefully at the association's reserve funds. If they can't identify how the reserve funding was set up, the report must then be qualified, which sends a red flag to prospective buyers that there may be insufficient funding and can hurt sales and resales. Also, secondary mortgage lenders are looking at association reserves to see if the association is being run in a business-like fashion before lending to a prospective buyer.
But most importantly, having a good reserve plan that's fully funded allows the association to keep the common areas in good condition so that your property values, your investment in your home, stays sound. Nobody wants to make that kind of major investment in their home only to see it deteriorate because the common areas are not kept up.
Your board needs your support and input in making the reserve plan one that works for both the association and for you. So take a long, hard look at the reserve plan. It's designed to protect your investment in your home.
The hang on, now wait. These 5 tapes, that's one of them, were sitting in our administration office library the day I was hired.
Can't hear
They've
you.
been here a long time.
Can't hear you.
That tape right there is one of 5. And they were in my administration office library conference room the day I was hired in '07. So a lot smarter people before me were here thinking about this stuff. And they've done a great job in maintaining the reserve plans and the elements of Brookridge, and just was asked to share the insights of this reserve funding plan with everybody. If you got one of these, again, if you didn't, you can get some at the office later on anytime, just ask. I'll reprint them. The first page is obviously the most important, and that's your reserve funding plan. And I highlighted the 2019, 2020, 21, and 22 areas because they're immediately here in front of us. And you can see the reserve contributions for 2019 is $398,900 that were obligated by both our governing documents and state law to fund it. If you recall, our budget included that funding as we're obligated under our bylaws at Brookridge, but it was voted down. So we still have to pay the money. So I had to take $38,000 from the operating account from somewhere. So I took it out of some attorney's costs and bad debt line items to cover that cost. So again, it's not something that if you vote it down, we don't have to put it there. We do. We still have to fund the plan. So as you can see for next year, we have $438,900, and that's, I believe, a $40,000 difference. Just standing for today, that $40,000 will mean next year's budget will be $1.18 more per month, just on the reserve funding plan alone. So, and that's how we stay ahead of the repair costs, keep funding it. We're legally obligated to fund the plan. The money's got to go there. So if it doesn't get approved, we have to take the money from somewhere else, and that's the operating. I know there's a lot of numbers there for you to chew on, observe. I took some notes during that. All of our accounts are FDIC insured. We have 10 or 12 banks, and now it's not $100,000 FDIC, it's $250,000 that we're insured with. And Brookridge carries an insurance policy that will cover any theft up to $2 million. So that's how much money we got, so we got insurance to cover that if that ever happened. We don't have any stock market investments. We use rotating 12, 24, 36-month CDs and money market accounts. They don't pay a lot, especially corporate accounts don't get as much as personal accounts. Our last update was 2017, and our next scheduled reserve update is 2021. It is a 30-year reserve study plan that we use. All the components, our components, are on they did a component method summary on page 2. That's this big page. And it tells us all of our components equal $9,197,000. And with our current reserve funding of $1,577,000, this was back in January 18, they say our reserve contributions, if they use the component method of funding, we'd have to come up with $826,000 to fund in a 12-month period. So we don't use the component method. The method of reserve is spread over the 30-year plan, and that is, I believe you're page 1 of 6. The 3 last pages. In the lower right, they say 3-1 of 6, 3-3 of 6, and 3-5 of 6. I just wanted to give you the components through from 2018 across the top to 2032. So there's more years after the 2032, but I just wanted to keep it within that time frame. So if you go down the 2019 column, this is how we, the managers, determine what we have to look at to see if we need to go out and get quotes. And the first item is the roof for the administration office. And we have inspected it and see no reason to replace it. We have no leaks in the office, so we move on. The money stays there, but let's say in 5 years, the roof needs replacing, not from storm. So that $27,000 is still our budget, but 5 years down the road when it fails, but it's in here. So you don't have to come up with a special assessment to cover that cost. So those are all the components down the left side that we reserve for. You can see on the roads, we take all our roads and we divide it into a 10-year rotation of paving. So we don't do everything in 1 year, which would probably be $2-3 million, just in roads, overlays. All the components, and our company is Reserve Advisors. So those are all the highlights from the tape and our funding plan. I'm sure I've got some other notes here. The cover page for this item was, that's the, from the reserve study. They put that in. This is their writing, recommended reserve funding. The association budgeted $240,900 for reserve contributions in 2015. We recommend the association budget annual phased increases in contributions of $78,000 from 2016 through 2020. Afterwards, the association should budget gradual annual increases in reserve funding that in part consider the effects of inflation. Then by 2025, the association will have fully funded for asphalt repaving. That was our biggest problem. The asphalt was not properly funded in those leading up to these 5 years. So that's why they needed to increase the funding. Beginning in 2026, the association can budget less significant increases in reserve funding that in part consider the effects of inflation. The inflation adjustment in reserve contributions of $78,000 represent about 5% adjustment in the 2015 total operating budget of 1.509. This initial adjustment of $78,000 is equivalent to an average monthly increase of $2.30 per owner. Everything below that is I put in. So our 2019 estimated starting funds and the middle column funding plan, that's what they say to put in, that's what we have been doing. You can see those, that column equals 1.2 million. The expenses on the right-hand side is 1.3 million. So while we're in the middle of a lot of paving, it's actually going to be spread out of the 30 years because we're on a paving plan. Any shortages on funding will cause problems to the reserve funding plan. Additional funding, 2020 reserve funding will be $438,900, an increase of $40,000. Other income sources, they were $132,800, which turns out to be a credit of $3.90 each month towards your budget. Anything we take in, fax money, barcode money, any income, late fees, fines, they all go towards your operating budget. It reduces the funds needed to run the company. 2019 budget fund carryovers. What I don't spend out of my budget goes to next year's budget. around October, November, December, we have a good idea how much money is going to be left over, and that will go into next year's budget. That's a credit of $1.21. Without these credits, without the other income, and without the carryover, the budget would be $5.11 more per month, or $48.11 today, without those two credits. So those two credits are very important for you to realize that they're there. The next sheet lists all the expenses detail for January through December last year. Unaudited, $411,000 in reserve expenses. And then the next three are highlighted with the yellow, and that's what we're going to plan on looking at this year. Lots of numbers, lots of graphs, lots of colors. It's, again, the funding, again, this has all started way before I showed up, and they put a lot of thought into maintaining reserves, and it's very important for this community. So I hope the next generations coming through will take, this as serious as they did to keep the community looking the way it is. I think that's all I have to say.
How much is there in bad debt that's owed to the community by non-payers?
Current, that's your receivable. That's outstanding. That's read at the treasurer's report. When it becomes bad debt is when we get a new owner and we don't collect the funds. We charge it to the bad debt administration budget.
When you ever receive money from that?
Yes, we do.
Does that go into reserves? Or
No, all goes into operating. That's other income. That's anytime we get any income, it goes into the other income category. In other words, you have assessments, and then you have other income. So
Is there any way we could put a lien on the home?
we do. Every homeowner, if they don't make their payment, they'll get a letter telling them in 45 days, if they don't make the payment, and here's the amount, we will process a lien. We send it off to the attorney. He files the lien. If they haven't collected the lien in 45 days, and there's no superior mortgage holder, we can file a foreclosure. Very few of those go through because of a superior mortgage, but we do lien the property.
But when they sell it, why can't we make the new owner? Like if you owe water or you owe back taxes or things like that?
We do, and obviously they do. Every owner purchaser is obligated, because we're a homeowners association, or nobody can, if anybody goes out and quit claims a property from you to you without any lawyers or title companies involved, shame on you and shame on you, because now you owe me $3,000.
That's why you do it as estoppel form.
That's why estoppels are formed, and we charge $25 for an estoppel. That's other income. 5 years ago, they didn't charge estoppel costs, so we got some more money. That's the answer.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, since the video seems to have been produced 22 years ago, has there been any changes made in laws since then?
The one is the $100,000, you heard him. FDIC now is insured for $250,000. Everyone agree?
Yeah.
I see nodding heads, yeah.
No, I wasn't here for the previous vote, because I just moved in, but was this played for the previous people that?
No, ma'am.
So do they understand? the money?
No, ma'am.
So they don't?
Shame on us, right?
Yeah.
Education's a beautiful thing when you know what you're paying for. And again, look around here, I got 50 people. I've got 2,480 homes that share the budget.
Can we have another vote after a little bit further?
Next year, every year,
Next year.
yeah.
Can I inject here too, is we didn't have too many voters.
Usually they get about 8% of the population.
So how do you get more people to be aware of it?
Spend more money. That's the problem. I can mail the budget out to everybody and vote on it, and it costs $3,000. That's not how they've done it here for the past 40 years. You come up here and vote.
Why not online voting of some kind?
The budget's okay. I've done the budget vote, and we did. We have 275 people that registered to vote online. This year, 80% participated. 80, not 80%, 80 participated. First year, 270 did.
So we should try to get money
Where's the plan to get the money to mail the voting, right? The budget?
now. Money to cover these losses.
Well, there are no losses, I just can't. My attorney's expenses for collections, they're curving this way. In 2007, we had a $32,000 receivable, accounts receivable, and shortly after that, this is what happened, right? The market. I had 132 plus homes in here that nobody was taking care of, nobody was living in it, and no one was paying it. It was rough. But now we're back up here, right? Anybody who's bought a house or sold a house knows that the market's here. And a lot of that, again, goes back to the people that made this place. They made a reserve fund that takes care of this place, and they control everything as far as expenses. They're not exorbitant.
I know you're talking about money to make people vote, but I think word of mouth or meetings, there's got to be more stimulation to let people know why. Like, this was a good idea, too bad people didn't do it before.
What about when people like us just moved in? What about if you showed this to them? I mean, to let them understand that they'd be forced to see it during the orientation and understand, and maybe charge them a fee to be part of, you come in, you pay $100, and you're part of it, that's $100.
You only pick up people, they $50 background check, are you kidding me? How many people in here have moved into Brookridge in the past 12 months? So everyone else has been here, over a year, and it's not the first budget vote, that we got. Complacency is a big thing. There's a lot of people that don't even know we have a swimming pool here. Honestly, I'm serious. We do. We have a beautiful meeting with Betty Hine. We have a closed circuit TV channel. We have this News and Views article that tells everything about Brookridge. We have 2 meetings a month. Most communities have 1 if they're lucky. No, for board meetings. And during board meetings, you just walk up to the podium, say, "Hi, I just moved in here. Can you tell me why the budget didn't pass?" I don't argue. I'm just saying, I don't want to be, I will highly encourage us to, bite the bullet and mail the budget out on a mailing this year.
How many people would mail that?
Again, probably 12, 15%.
It's more than 9.
It is more than 9. So true. Richard Stratton.
Yeah, Richard Stratton, Unit 3.
Hi.
Been here many years. I won't say 10, I won't say 20, I won't say 30. My parents and that were past 30 years. And we've seen a lot. Ray does a great job. Lady up there does a wonderful job. And you're proud of her. I've been here many years, and it's been the good old voice, excuse me for saying that, but she's a woman here and does a great job. That's what we're doing in today's business today. Many years ago, this wasn't around. If you asked anybody, there been a clubhouse? What clubhouse? You laugh. Don't laugh.
No, he's right. A lot of people, they just buy, they move in, they go about their life,
They have no idea.
Oblivion. But they go through a meeting and orientation with Betty. I don't know if you had a question or if you were leading up to it.
News and views? People don't even know what it is. Do we know what news and views is?
Yeah.
We do.
Just read it.
Some don't. They never even grab it. So there are people here that don't even realize what's going on here. They're oblivious to this. They come and go down the boulevard. That's it.
But again, reserves is the topic here, and I want you to know that, the reserve funding plan is a sound funding plan. Everything they read off in the beginning, we follow. We fund by it. Our governing documents, our bylaws, you look and read the bylaws, it says the board is responsible to have a budget with a funding plan for the reserves. It's right there, black and white.
Since we didn't approve the budget this year, I presume that dollar increase was to keep us on the
Reserve funding plan, correct.
So that's a dollar you didn't get this year. Is it fair to assume that next year that dollar will have to be added into whatever is calculated on a monthly increase to make up for that dollar this year you didn't get plus next year?
To borrow it back again, my two line items I stole from was bad debt. If you look at the operating budget for administration, there's a line item that says bad debt. If you look at, compared to the year before, you'll see it's missing money. So I reduced that, and I keep my fingers crossed. That's the reality of it. At attorneys, that was the other line item. I took it and I put it in reserves. So your reserve funding plan is still on track.
So
The
it's
money,
not like there was money that needs to be made up for next year because you were able to cover it by...
correct. Here's the pretty, that line item in bad debt, and I want to say I reduced it to $3,000. And at the end of this year, I spent $2,800 of it. It worked, you know. If I took it out of fuel, $12,000, and I took $5,000 out of it, and I still spent $20,000. So it's where can I justify taking it from?
So you're gonna get an increase in the budget next year, you're gonna try again?
And again, so if there was no operating increase, so let's say it plays out like that and we can get through again, and what did I tell you, we're going up $1.18 for next year? Yep, so 43, 44, round up, 45.
They may expect you to take it out of administration next year again.
Oh, we will, because we have no other budget to take it from. That's the only choice.
That's a state statute.
I got to take the money from somewhere.
Why do the residents vote on it? Why don't you just do it?
That's a good question. Our association, it's a member-driven organization. There's a lot of homeowners associations where the board dictates the budget. Next year's budget will be $110. Boom, gavel. No ifs, ands, or buts. Your only recourse is to vote in another board, not Brookridge.
Doug Roll on Unit 4. Does the board or does the community have any idea why this budget was voted down? I know it was a number of people voting. Numbers. But, there had to be something that moved this community to vote no.
I wouldn't speculate. As an employee and a non-owner, I don't live in Brookridge, I would not want to speculate. It's just the nature of the beast.
I've been here 15 years, and in the 15 years I've been here, I think we may have voted down 2 budgets, maybe 3.
Closer to 4, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up there. It's happened a few times.
Part of the reason, and I'm not an employee, I'm a volunteer, I don't get paid, none of us do.
Oh, that's right, I'm on the clock.
Yes, it's on the clock. The problem that I've heard this year from many, many people, because everybody comes up and talks to me, is that we gave you $2 last year. You spent it all, so we're not giving you $1 this year. That was what people are saying. And I want to congratulate Ray Joe. For those of you that know, Ray Joe is our manager, is our general manager of Brookridge, and he has done a great job. I want to remind everybody, and I hope that you take this to everybody that you talk to. We have worked on a flat operating budget for 4 years. We have had to, you've seen some cuts in the personnel here. We don't have a full-time pool monitor. You're gonna see Vince, who shouldn't be doing the work of a working foreman. He's supposed to be a supervisor. He is a working foreman. He goes over and above. We're all doing more with less because all of our expenses, I mean, your electricity is gone up, water has gone up, the sewer has gone up, the Spectrum's gone up, Republic has gone up. But we're still operating on nothing. And we know it's really hard for people, and I'll be right with you, it's really hard for people because everyone says, I'm on a limited income. But what happens is, if we don't keep this up, we're all responsible for everything here. Like we update our homes, we have to update here. We are obligated by the state to do that. And when we don't have that money, this guy here, he's lost all his hair because of this.
Don't feel too
So
bad.
that's, yeah, so, you know, we want you to, and I hope that, ask a question first, ma'am.
Well, here's my question. Sometimes it appears that the board spends more money than was it really necessary to get a new fancy gate with lights on it and a stoplight and all that? That's an example.
The reason why we did that, and Ray, I'll let you, there was a reason why we had to go with a new one.
We did. Our old equipment, we couldn't get parts anymore. So we have to move out and get a new, the outbound side is outdated. We cannot get parts for that if anybody breaks it or if it breaks. The inbound quote came from our vendor, very reputable, you know, full, good equipment. LED lights beside the point, those were words, qualifications I put into it. He just said the equipment nowadays has all these LED lights, and if you look at your vehicles, LED lights, you know, there are dollars worth of add-on.
Well, it just seems like maybe there was a less expensive gate available.
I wouldn't doubt that there would be, correct. But I also have to make sure it can work with our software. Because there's a computer in the guardhouse that runs all those gates. There's loop wires in the ground that tells the gate to tell the gear to go down when the metal of your vehicle has left the zone. That's how the gate comes down. It's not a 3-second timer. If your vehicle is 20 foot long, it's going to stay up for all 20 feet. So everything's computerized.
The other thing with the gate is that, I don't have the exact figures, but we had almost 1 million people going through one gate, and a cheap unit is not going to take that kind of use.
New gate has been down a lot.
It definitely had its issues after the first demolition, we shall say. One of our residents was just, you know, talking on a cell phone, drove right through it and took the whole gate with it, and it came back. And again, these are sold with the intent that somebody is going to make a mistake and drive through it. We call them breakaway booms.
Shouldn't the resident pay for that then if they broke it?
He did.
Their insurance company has to pay for it.
The damage it did to the internal 4 months or 3 months later showed up, according to the manufacturer. That's why it was down for 2 to 3 weeks missing. Yeah. It was back at the manufacturer. And they were saying, no, it's damage from impact. We're not going to warranty it. It's a 2-year warranty.
You got it though.
Yeah. There was not pleasant calls. There was some anger vented across the state. They're on the other side of the state, over near Melbourne, where my brother lives. So they honored the warranty, and there was no charge to Brookridge.
Good.
So, and
You're right, I've been living here 4 years and I love it here. Right? But I want to ask one big question, one big quickie question. Out of 2,800 owners, what percentage of the 2,800 owners do you need to get a passing vote?
Usually 20% show up, it's approved, or overwhelmingly rejected.
So 20% or more?
Usually will approve a budget or overwhelmingly rejected. And there was usually a good reason for a rejection, lack of information.
What month is the vote?
What month is the vote?
In November, it is the third Tuesday in the clubhouse, and it's announced on the third Wednesday in the clubhouse.
Can you move it?
It's November.
Can you get it?
Get down here early.
If you can move it ahead, we can get the snowbirds, you're going to get a bigger vote.
I'm going to leave that to the next board.
That's, there's a couple of things. We now have like 900 emails. Many of them are the seasonals, and we tell them. Ray is very, very vigilant. He's our recording secretary too, by the way. And he.
Do the budget cuts.
Yes, we don't, in one thing.
Yeah, we can mail it. It'll be $3,000 in a budget line item that I don't have.
See, we don't have it.
I mean, I could spend it and be over budget. All in favor, say aye.
We could get you to vote online.
Right,
Can
online.
we do an absentee vote this year before we leave?
I wish you could. I wish you could. We can't, illegal. It's state statute. Everything is.
And two things on your email. 970 of you, I have your email. 275 or so have opted in to vote electronically. 275 out of the 975 have opted in to vote electronically. Just because I have your email and get my monthly notes about this, that, and the other, doesn't mean that you've opted in to vote online. We'll only run it for the budget because it is very cumbersome to run an election through online voting.
What month does the budget come out?
Well, we start talking about it in the summer, July, August, September. The board accepts it in October, sends it out for vote in October.
Okay.
Perhaps what we can do is, and one thing we're trying to do is get more people involved in giving you more information. And perhaps what we can do is, when we send out that email about the vote, maybe we can put something in there about online voting, and this is how, watch for the online voting, but you have to request it so that it can be set up, because it's done by a company. We don't do it ourselves.
No, I need your signature.
Yeah.
You go to Vivian at the office, and it's online. You print it out, you sign it, and you mail it to us. Now you have opted in for online voting. It can only go to one email address. Okay? You have a question?
It's not a question, I just wanted to express my appreciation that as a snowbird for 6 months a year up in Ohio, I think you would do a fantastic job when there is a hurricane or something. When Irma came through, we so much appreciated you sending out those emails so we knew what was happening in Brookridge.
Irma scared a lot of us.
Yeah.
I did like one of the builders around here, one of the builders, manufacturer home builders, Palm. They had a park in Key West, and there's probably 20 or 30 homes in there, and 10 or 15 of them were Palm Harbors. All the other homes in Palm Harbors all stood. There's an online video at YouTube, I think I got it saved, that it shows the devastation from that park down there, and all these Palm Harbor homes were standing. I just thought that was fascinating, and a lot up in Michael, in the Panhandle too.
Really?
Yeah.
To ask this question, was it the last meeting I was at, a gentleman stood up and said that he heard we're gonna have to start paying for the amenities
RV storage, okay. I think this is one of the issues that was brought up in the budget. We have an RV compound, and it has about 225, 250 spots in it. And other communities around here, Timber Pines, High Point, they all charge yearly charges, and it goes to other income.
I put charges because when we were inquiring there, they told us they didn't charge.
Who?
High Point.
High Point, yeah, I got their rate schedule.
At least $100 a year.
I have their printed schedule, they gave me the rate, so, you know, we've been talking about this in Brookridge long before I was here, and I brought it up to the last finance committee and suggested it. Upon legal review by our attorney, only because we itemize specifically in our governing documents, deed restrictions, that the board has the authority to charge a pool use fee to non-owners, live-ins, non-owners. You're not a title owner, but the person living with you has to pay $10 for their
So if my
pass.
son comes down from Ohio,
He's got to pay for the pass.
you got to pay, right?
Right. So, because we specifically identify that charge in the deed restriction, we would need to amend that section to include any other amenities like the RV compound, but not specifically.
So do we vote on that?
You will vote on it. You will vote.
That's one of our deed restriction changes.
It's coming in the mail. There's 2 items, one for the sheds and one for authorization for the board to impose a fee for other income, but it doesn't mean they will, and it doesn't mean they won't. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
And if they did,
I think
it would be $1.
Yeah, well, that's the part that the person that brought it up kind of blew out his fortune.
Yeah, but I mean, it's okay. I mean, everybody can call it what it is. It's basically, I can't even call bingo rent anymore because the attorney said you cannot classify bingo rent. It's an expense that we have, so it's now an expense. It's an income expense, but it's income. Yes?
Where would the money go to that the charge would be for the RV compound?
Be in the other income category as a different source of
Doesn't
money.
have anything to do with the reserve,
Nothing to do with the reserves.
Now, I, along with many other people, have donated money.
Yes, you have.
To the reserve.
No, you donated
To the RV compound.
donated funds category. It's not even anything associated with,
You know what
I do, yeah.
All right, now, the majority of the people voted down an increase of $1.
Correct.
We have that, and after tonight, you brought it to everyone's attention, the importance of, everyone that's here anyway, the importance of this reserve, which only makes sense. Why, have you thought about, you've been so successful with the volunteer money, with the donation money, have you thought about putting another one of those little things out there by the gate that shows how many thousands of dollars have been donated? This is equally as important as the sign.
That is amongst you,
Yeah,
okay?
that's
That's something that is, I can appreciate it, but from an employee's point of view, it cannot be an item that I can measure or quantify as in conversations with reserves or operating budgets, ethically speaking.
Wait, I mean, we couldn't afford to have another one of those things put up?
You can take all your donations that you want and go down to that compound and pave it all if you guys so choose. The HOA would have no objections.
That's donated funds from the.
Once we take it, we now are obligated to accept it, like all these doors that open automatically. Those were all bought with donations, but now I've got to pay out of operating to take care of them when the parts break.
in the amendment, it just doesn't state the RV compound, though. It states all amenities.
It does.
Which means swimming pool, tennis court, bocce.
Swimming pool's already covered.
Anything.
Tennis courts, if they so desire, they could charge guest pass.
But whoever wrote this directed it at the RV compound.
Well, just as an example, such as.
Such,
But believe me.
the conversation,
This is when you rub people the wrong way. You directed it at the RV compound.
correct.
So,
And
listen,
it was not
I'm-
intended to hide it with it.
I've been in here, like I say, 15 years, and I'm in favor of these budgets. But see, you alienated these people. Now you've been alienated 250
All right.
votes.
I understand what you're saying. And when we gave the information to the attorney and asked him for the verbiage that we can send out to vote, okay, give it to us. That's what we got. That wasn't written by me. It wasn't written by any board member. His name is Steve Messer. He wrote it that way.
Yes, sir, I understand that. Now, in years past, they tried to do this too. And the lawyer always stated, once you start charging, you're going to become liable for all damage, missing property, vandalism, or anything that happens.
Okay, I'd like to.
Now, if it's changed, I don't know.
Okay, let me just say.
I am going to bow out gracefully at this point and call it an evening. It's 8:15.
Thank you very much.
Ray doesn't like to speak publicly, and he tries to stay silent, but we always ask him questions because he's a very smart man, very humble. He's probably going to be very red-faced, but he's done a great job. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome. Good night.
He's on the clock. Okay, but I just want to, I will take yours. This meeting was specifically for the reserves. I know that we got a little off track, but it's important to hear people's questions. The town hall meetings was something that the board really felt strongly because we wanted to get information. We wanted this kind of give and take that we can't do at a meeting because a meeting is for business. We want to